Welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Crispen from Whitehall PD in Ohio. 33 years total in law enforcement, the last 10 years as chief of police. He's a U.S. Army veteran. He has a master's in public administration. He's currently working on his PhD dissertation. He is married, has 3 kids, and 9 grandchildren. Really looking forward to having him today. Welcome to the show, Chief Crispen. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Paige, for the invitation. I really appreciate it.
Of course. I asked you offline because, everyone says that it's much better to be a grandpa, and you agreed. You said being a grandpa is super, super fun. I can't believe you have 9 grandkids.
9 grandkids. I have three grown children, but I sometimes forget that I have them because I have 9 grandkids. They sometimes take your focus.
Yeah. Well,
It's great.
and you have a lot of other things going on too. It was my first question when I was kind of going through your bio. You're working on your PhD dissertation. You have a wife, you have kids, you have 9 grandchildren. One of the things I hear all the time when we're talking about wellness and self development and professional development is the statement of, I don't have time.
Mhm.
And so, my question to you is, with everything that you have accomplished throughout your career, everything that you're currently juggling within your professional and personal life, what advice or, maybe what would you say to people who say, I don't have time, and how have you been able to find the time?
Well, I'll start by saying that I haven't always found the time perfectly, right? So that took some time to learn how to do that, I think. Um, I was one of those people young in a career, taking off just like everyone else, and I had stars in my eyes. I'm going to save the world as a new police officer out of the academy, and all that stuff, which is also very important. And I certainly support that kind of a mentality. That's what attracts people to this profession, which I do believe is quite a noble profession.
Mhm.
But one of the things that I learned over my time, if I was given some advice, and I have given this advice to some of my officers, is that term work-life balance. I hear it a lot, but I don't know that we really know what it means when we say work-life balance, right? So if I just did it on a numbers game, I'm going to lose that game. In other words, if I say 8 hours at work and 8 hours at home, that should be a balance, right? They're equal than 8 hours of sleeping. Everything would be perfectly equal. But in reality, if I'm 8 hours at work and 8 hours at home, and I'm out golfing or I'm out running around with my friends, and I'm really not home with my family, or I'm not doing the things that I decide is most important to me in reality, then I'm probably not really in a balance. So I can balance when a work-life balance sort of concept with 2 hours by giving 2 quality hours to the people that are important to me, to the things that are important to me. It's less about the number of hours that I'm away from work and more about how much quality time I'm putting into each one of those individual things. So that's usually how I lay that out. Because if you're in law enforcement, I, I, I assume most people coming into law enforcement have to realize that schedule work-life balance is not a real thing.
Yeah.
You're not going to get 8 hours at work and be at home. You're going to get eight and then forced over another four. Sometimes you're held for another eight under extreme circumstances. I had to work a 31-hour shift once searching for a suspect. So you're not always home. But when you are home, or when you're working on schoolwork, or you're going to church, or spending time with your friends and family, it's the quality that makes that balance to me.
Yeah, I love that. And I agree with you. I'm a very visual learner. And so I always think about it in terms of like a scale. You have the two scales, and I don't think that there's anything in our life that's ever perfectly in balance with each other. There's always going to be give and take, right? And we have to understand that there's nuances to life, and there are unexpected things that happen, and our schedules and our days are not groundhog. It's not like rinse and repeat the exact same thing every day. And that can go with our personal lives too. Maybe you do have plans to do dinner, and then you have a kid that's sick, and then you have, other things going on that happen. And so I really appreciate you saying that. If we look at the numbers and we expect it to be 50-50,
Right.
we are going to lose. We are not setting realistic expectations for ourselves. But if you can come at it and say, hey, I can spend an hour of quality time doing this. I can spend 2 hours of quality time. That is something that I can create consistency with and something that I can have more dedication to. And I think it also like releases a little bit of pressure. I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to do things perfectly. But if you're like, hey, what is one thing I can commit to? And doing an hour or two of quality time is something I can commit to.
Oh, that's perfect. I agree with you. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves in ways that when you get older, we're sort of hitting my age as I'm knocking on the door of 60. When you get older and look back at those wonderful grandkids and the things we just talked about, you start realizing all those things you put pressure on yourself for, they really weren't good reasons to take your time away from the important stuff because they really weren't something as important to you as you thought they were initially.
Yeah.
So putting that in perspective is key. So thanks for saying that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you for saying that because I agree. I think life become is put in perspective, as you do get older, you become wiser. They have that saying that youth is wasted on the young,
Yes.
because I wish that I could have all the knowledge and the perspective that I have now and be 20 years younger than I am and, be able to live life in that way. But of course, it doesn't happen that way. We have to learn and, learn from our experiences and learn from our mistakes. But there are a lot of things that I wish I would have realized were important when I was younger. And I thought that my job was everything. And it is something I'm proud of. And it is something that is important. And I don't want to downplay that our careers are not important or not worth putting 100% into because I do think that they are. But it was everything. And I didn't give myself the space to prioritize my own wellness. I didn't give myself the space to give quality time to my loved ones. I sacrificed a lot of that time. And those are the things that I look back on now and think, could I have done both? And I think the answer is yes. But to your point, maybe it wouldn't have been 50-50, but I still could have done more in my own personal life.
Yeah, I had a boss once say to me, he said, rather than focus so much on where you put the majority of your energy, just be 100% present where you are.
Mm,
Right. And so if you're with your family, be 100% present there, right? You spend time with them, get off that phone, which is really harmful to us nowadays. Put that thing in that little uh, basket when you're going to dinner, right? I
yeah.
was guilty of this. So I'm saying this almost hypocritically, right? Because we always got my phone around, right? But um, we should we should just start to be present as much as possible with the people that we're at, and then move on when we move to different environments, and know how to compartmentalize and just let that go. You can't deal with it right now, so why are you so focused on it, right? Just be present with the people that's in your lives at the time they're with you.
Yeah, there's a quote
Mhm.
that really stuck with me. It's people deserve the best of you, not the rest of you. And I think that I did that a lot, right? I would give everything to my career and then I'd come home and I had nothing left. And to your point, I had to, and this helped me a lot, because I do think that we will always have more things to do. There's always another email, there's always another thing, and so for me, mentally, I had to say, hey, there's buckets of like importance. There's things that like absolutely have to be done right now, like do or die. Those are obviously going to be like things that are going to require your attention right in that moment. Then there are things that are like medium, and then there are things that are low. And like medium to low, probably don't need to be taken care of right now. High, yes. And like, what those things are. And you know that those are kind of one offs. Those aren't the majority, right? It's like every once in a while, there's like something that has to be addressed right then and there. But otherwise, like if it's an email, I can wait a couple hours to answer that email and I can be present with my friends or family or the things that we're doing, and that helped me a lot because I thought that everything was high priority. And I had to understand that we have to be able to like segment these things out and put them into different buckets in order for us to have that space to be present.
Yes, when I was in the academy teaching, we used to call psychology or survival. One of the last portions of that class, we would do an exercise. You may have heard of it, but we would do an exercise that would help people focus on what their long-term, short-term goals, but also most importantly, what was really important to them. And one of the things we would do is say, pull out a sheet of paper, write down your three goals, write down your goals for your 3 year long-term goals, right? What would you like to achieve in the next 3 years? And then they would do that, one or two things. And then I would say, write down short-term goals. If I run into you 12 months from now, what would you like to tell me you achieved? And I'll write that down. And then I'll adjust the criteria at the end and say, guess what? You only have 6 months left to live. And I want you to write down what you want to achieve over the next 6 months. Don't say I'm going to try to stay alive or do things you don't have money for. In reality, what would you do if you knew you were going to die in 6 months for real? And then we'd go around the room and we would ask, tell me your 3 year goals. What's your 1 year goal and what's your 6 month goal? And you'd have the 3 year goals all over the place. You'd have the 1 year goals kind of similar, but still kind of all over the place. And then the 6 month goal, interestingly enough, almost to a person, well, I'd spend more time with my family, or I'd want to do this with my kids, right? Those weren't in the first 3 and 1 year goals, but they were definitely in the when I'm going to die goals, right? And
Mm,
so what we would say to them as a teaching point is you don't know if that 6 month started 5 months ago. So why spend you got to do those 3 year goals. You got to be focused on those 1 year's goals, but don't sacrifice the 6 month goal to achieve them. And
mm.
that's what I think you're saying.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that. I think it puts things in perspective. And I do think we have to sit down and ask ourselves our why and what are things that are important to
Mhm.
us and how can we make those a priority today. Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing. There are a few things I really want to dive into that you have been a part of. And one of those was in 2017. So you led the Whitehall PD to become the first agency in Central Ohio to require annual wellness visits for all officers and
Mhm.
dispatchers. Can you walk us through a little bit about why this was important to you, how this got started, and maybe some of the challenges that you faced being the first to do this?
Yeah. Well, sure. Well, first, the reason for me was it starts with TV. They make these comments about officers, and I'm going to use the term they would use on TV. He sent them off to the shrink, quote unquote, right?
Mm,
And they start to get this stigma about going to see a psychiatrist or a social worker or somebody that could just sort of help you strengthen your brain the same way you strengthen your muscles. And so that concept wasn't really digging into our profession at the time. So we have what the employee assistance program, which means they can call, they can get a psychiatrist or somebody to help them. But generally, people aren't doing that on their own. So what I was looking for is I knew we have 2 to 3% roughly in our profession, and that's just anecdotal numbers. But I know we got a small percentage who are truly in a bad way. We have an extremely high number of suicides in law enforcement and public safety. So how do we catch them even if we don't need to catch all the rest, right? And so for me, it was really simple. You cast a wide net and
mm,
you mandate that everybody must go and let them build a relationship with this person. I don't get any information back from them other than a bill. And that was my reasoning for it. And I knew there would be some resistance at first. You're making us go. Um, but even after the first time we went, they first put on some classes for everybody, fitness, some of the same wellness kind of things you do such a good job on here in your program, and talk to them about that. And then we sent each one of them one at a time to have a 1 hour meeting with the organization. When that was over, I did a survey, an independent, anonymous survey. And over 90% of them said that they thought this was great, that they thought it might save someone's life. Now, there
mm,
were a handful that didn't like being told what to do. I mean, we're all still humans. So that caused a little bit of grief from their union. They filed a grievance on it. Um, but over time, through discussions, through things that was happening in the nation, not long after that, that thing held out for about 2 years, roughly. That potential grievance and arbitration about it. They wanted me to still make it voluntary, which would just be EAP again,
right.
right? So in the end, they embraced it too, and not only they embraced it, there's certain mandates now at negotiation that they want. So I think that's great. So they got on board with it as well over time. I think 2020 sort of helped with that because when we got to that point, everybody was kind of looking at law enforcement, and that was one of the things they were looking at. But I can tell you, we've been doing it since 17. A lot of agencies have gotten on board with this organization since. And my officers, my dispatchers, people that have a good relationship with them, they'll come to me and ask, can I get another another moment with them. I need it. And she has built such a great relationship with them. She knows their families, she knows their backgrounds. And occasionally she'll give me some feedback when I do mine because I make myself go also. You lead by example, right? So I'm going too, and my staff. And during mine, half of mine is usually a business meeting, like what's going on with the money and stuff. But at the end of that, she'll give me a little bit of feedback on just the health and the wellness of our organization as a whole. And
Mm.
that to me is extremely valuable. So it's been tremendous. If we tried to take it away from them now, that'd be a real grievance.
I love, there's a few things I want to circle back to, but I love that you were able to really measure the ROI, right? And I
Mhm.
think that a lot of conversations revolve around that, right? There's money involved, and people are maybe afraid, I don't want to say afraid, but maybe skeptical of putting forth initiatives when they don't know what the ROI is going to be, especially when it costs money. But for you to say that 90% of your organization, and you have a fairly large organization. For anyone who doesn't know, I think you have maybe around 100
There's about 100 employees here,
100
yes,
employees, yeah.
civilian. Mhm.
So for most agencies across the country, like fairly large, like medium to large size agencies.
Mhm.
So for 90% of your organization to say, yes, I think that this could save a life, I don't know a bigger ROI than that, and especially for, people here. And here's the thing that I always try to encourage everyone to kind of look at things is, maybe something's not for you. Maybe like you don't love it, but if you can recognize that this could be something that could help the person next to you and that you think that this could be helpful for someone else, to save their life
Mhm.
or to impact their health and wellness. And we can start looking at it as a team mentality of like, hey, maybe I prefer to work out and another person prefers to, I don't know, go to a yoga class or whatever. Maybe the other one isn't for you, but can you recognize that that's beneficial for the people within the organization? And so I love that you had 90% say that. I think that that's huge. And now you're saying fast forward, if you took it away,
Oh,
people
yeah.
would be even more up in arms. So I also appreciated you talking about mental training. There is a quote that I really like, and it says that the most important training is between your ears.
Mhm. That's for sure.
Yeah. So, in your opinion, EAP is not enough, and wellness or mental wellness, such as this, should be something that's mandated.
I think it should definitely be mandated. I think we've got to be very careful in how you do it because if you mandate it, there are some places that might want information back since they're paying for it. I think that might be crossing a line. They're not going to feel comfortable. Your employees need to know that when they go in and have conversations with them, that that information isn't going to leak out. Now, by law, it's not supposed to.
Right.
And so that still shouldn't, but they need to be in the policy or in your implementation of it. They need to be reassured of this. Whatever they talk about is between the two of you, right? Sometimes they don't even want to answer their questions. Sometimes they don't want to have any conversations about football. They'll talk about football, right, just to avoid it. But over time, she'll build a relationship with them. That's what we pay her for. That's her job, right? She knows how to extract that information, gain the confidence. That's not my job to do. My job is just to get them to the appointment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've said this before, but in my mind, even if you do have an officer or a dispatcher that goes into their mandated, scheduled meeting and they talk about football, we all know that decompression is a part of wellness, and if that's an hour where they don't have to worry about work and they can just kind of like, have a conversation about something that they enjoy having a conversation about for an hour, sitting or lying down, to me, that's wellness, to be
Mhm.
able to decompress, to be able to have conversations that are outside of what you do. Obviously, you would prefer maybe them to like offload some
Yeah.
of the other things, but I think that it's a win, especially if you're seeing numbers like 90%.
For sure.
The other thing I wanted to talk about was this initiative for wellness for executives. So, you were the president of the Central Ohio Chiefs Association, and you created and launched a wellness course that was specifically designed for police executives. Can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe some of the personal experiences you were having, or maybe some of the conversations you were having with other chiefs where you recognized that this was something that needed to be implemented.
Sure. If I may, let me take this to on a more uh, a holistic approach for both officers and executives that
Sure.
actually gets me to the executives,
Yeah.
because I think there was a part of that was missing. So we've talked about fitness. You talk about a lot, right? And you talk about nutrition and mental wellness, and those are all very key ingredients, I believe, to officer wellness. But at the very pinnacle of that, I think, is something else called purpose, right? They need to have a purpose in why they even do this job. And I'm going to be honest with you, from an animal kingdom perspective, it makes no sense to go put yourself in line of another animal to keep them from getting killed where you may lose your life. That's what makes us different than the animal kingdom, right? So we have people among us willing to put themselves in harm's way. We saw that September 11th. We've seen that time and time again. We recently saw it here in Dayton, Ohio, where officers are running at the really bad stuff while everybody else is running away from it. You need those types of people who, I often use the term, might not be the right one, but who are used to trafficking in violence and chaos, right? And bringing order to the situation. And you got to understand what your purpose is. And that's what I tell my officers. Make sure you understand your purpose. And what is that purpose? Well, our purpose is to do just that, bring some form of uh, order to a chaotic situation so that people can be free to live as our Constitution says. And that's the key. And one of the things we do is teach our officers the Constitution. When right out of once they're done with initial training, they have to take a Constitution course to
Mm.
understand that their duty is to protect people's rights to life, their liberties, and their property rights. And that's why we're here. And we're going to see a lot of really bad things in our careers. But remember, the things we're seeing is almost like spectators. It's actually happening to those people. And so we get the privilege to actually bring some form of order and peace to their lives, even if it's not complete. It's enough to stop to allow them to start putting the pieces back together. And while you pile that on top of a whole career of seeing those things, it can be a little bit frustrating to see, or hard to deal with if you don't deal with it in a timely manner, like you've talked about a lot.
Yeah.
But that has to you have to understand that that's a purpose of an officer. That is your purpose, right? And it's a privilege purpose. It's not a burden. It's a privilege, right? And so not a lot of people get that opportunity, and you only get to do it for so many years. I'm 33 years, right? I wish I could be younger and keep going, but this was really a noble profession. And as long as they start seeing it that way, then when they see those things, yeah, they're horrible, but don't become numb to them, but also don't let them tear you down.
Mm.
You're in a place where you can solve the problem for somebody, and that every one of those things are a win. Anything from going into a house and stopping violence, or bringing some resources to a wife who was beaten pretty seriously, or you could make a traffic stop for speed. Any one of those have a potential of saving someone's life down the road, right? Making a huge impact. And so I try to really stress that on them. Try to tell them, it's each person has their own sort of concept about this, but I really think you have to have solid faith that you're doing the right thing for the right reasons. And so it starts there for me with officers is understand that's your purpose. And if you've got that down, then you deal with the small things. Are you familiar with a guy by the name of Bobby Smith, a Louisiana state trooper? Does that sound familiar to you?
So I don't think so.
Bobby has since passed away, but he used to come to our academy. And I'm not going to tell his story for the sake of time and because it's his story. But if someone ever wanted to look him up, he's got a book, and he wrote one years ago about what happened to him. But on a traffic stop, he got shot in the face with a shotgun, and he went totally blind for life. Strong, into fitness, into ground fighting, just a solid state trooper in Louisiana. And Bobby would go around teaching to classes, academy classes, about stress management. And
Mm.
he said, inside of you, I want you to sort of picture that you got this glass of water, or a glass. As you have little bits and pieces of stressors that you haven't dealt with, that glass is slowly filling up. And you have to tip it out every so often. Because if you don't deal with those issues, you don't find ways, a lot like what you're doing, how to deal with those stressors, you're going to get something really big that's going to overflow that glass. And so Bobby would talk about that a lot to new recruits, and we sort of borrow that and still say, deal with each stressor as it comes in. A lot of times in law enforcement, because we don't understand our purpose, we have we're tempted to try to explore and find purpose. And guess where we do that? Another very, very important piece of wellness that we haven't talked about is finances. And then we start buying things and we buy toys and we get ourselves in debt and then we got to go back to work and then we got to spend more hours at work and then I'm not paying my bills. So I find happiness in another toy. It just keeps growing. And you're working all this special duty and doing all those types of things. And you've lost sight of your purpose. Your purpose was a privilege for society, something very few people get the option and opportunity to do. And then balancing that with what's really important in your life, which is your family, right? Taking care of that 6 month goal we talked about earlier. And so, in that grand concept, I know it's a long way around to get to your answer about executives, but I want to take that and shift it over then to the executives. As you're going through this career, you're everything I just mentioned with the officer, and you're working hard. You're getting promoted. Every promotion is a form of of someone telling you that they appreciate your work you've done, they appreciate who you've become as a police officer, so much so they want to promote you and put you into a different position. Then you ultimately get to the top. I'm going to call that a chief, but it could be a sheriff, it could be the superintendent, could be any executive over any law enforcement. Just for the sake of generic terms, I'll just say chief of the organization. And once you become the chief, you've brought all those friends with you, but then you forget something. As you've moved up that chain, you've gotten a lot more isolated. Mm. You don't have the peer support that you had before. You don't have the locker room conversation. You don't have the cruiser that's window to window like we often do. You see them talking to each other. You're the only one, and we teach you to not gripe down, right? So you're not going to gripe to your deputy chiefs or to your captains or lieutenants or so on. And so as a result of that, you think, well, then they could go up, right? But people above you are elected officials. And so they got pressure coming to you. Your employees have pressures coming at you. The community's got pressures coming at you. And then your spouse and family got pressures coming at you saying, where have you been? You've been at work for 12 hours. And you end up getting in this little isolated capsule that even when you reach out to your fellow chiefs, they're in such an isolated capsule, we call it siloing, mm-hmm. that they are dealing with their own issues, right? And so what I noticed that because we have 7 counties in our Chiefs Association, so quite a few, almost 100 executives in some form, federal, state, and local. And what I noticed was that those people would call me occasionally. Now, when I took on that position, I didn't know I was going to be I feel like I'm a social worker of some sort. I just thought I was going to handle the association. But people started calling me with personal issues. And we would sit and have coffee and we would talk about them. And so I reached out to the same organization that was helping me with my officers. Can you help me with these chiefs? Because they're supposed to be super chiefs, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody expects they have all the answers. They're supposed to take care of their employees, implementing a wellness program with gymnasiums and chiropractic stuff like we've got, nutritionists that we've got. All those things that we do is now expected of you. Mm-hmm. It's not even you're not really breaking ground anymore. It's expected. You're also expected to make sure the community's safe. You're also expected to answer the questions of your elected officials, your mayors, your city managers, your city council members. You also have to deal with very politely the number of people in the community who just don't like your boss, and so they're by nature don't like you, right? And so all those things start coming at you, and then you make a grand mistake. You start reading social media posts and the comments under them, which we say stop doing that, right? Everybody's got an opinion. Social media has allowed them to all kinds of voices to be heard everywhere. What it's done is it's lost truth. Truth is usually not in there very often. So we tell them, don't look at that. Your reputation is important to you. It's what made you who you are. You've got 25, 30 years as a chief or as an officer that got you to a chief. And you got a handful of people that want to destroy your reputation. So we often tell them, she does too, put these things in buckets. Right, and understand what's really important to you. Right, what I have found personally from the training that we put together for our chiefs and just my own experiences is that the more pressure you get from all those, guess what they do? They force you to that 6 month goal you were talking about. They
Mhm.
force you to focus on the things that were really important anyway. Those people, those small group, a number of friends that you have, your family, they don't care about your reputation. They know who you are, right? And that's character, right? They know who you are as a person. And that's something our chiefs are, it's just hard, right? It's hard for them to show any vulnerability because who are they going to show it to?
Right.
Right. And they certainly can't show it to their employees. And so I really think it's a forgotten group that's under a ton of stress. Um, I've been here now for a decade, so I think I'm number one or two of the most senior chiefs in the area. Our largest city is Columbus Police Department. I think I'm on my third or fourth chief there since I've been here. And same thing with the ones all the way around me. So I've watched them come and go in my association, brand new, then work their way in, then they retire, someone else has come. Maybe it's a sign to me that aren't you supposed to retire by now, right? You're still here. But, I still love the job. I always will love it. And I think for the Chiefs, and I'll end here, but I think for the Chiefs, what I wanted them to be able to do, if we could do it, would have been it's such a win, and I think we will. Just like you, I guarantee you've touched lives in ways you'll never know. You've allowed tree branches to keep growing on family trees because of some of the programs you've put in place.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we don't get to see the result. We just have to have faith that that's what it's doing, right? And that's how I feel about these Chiefs. And it really hit me once when I was having coffee with one of the Chiefs, and I really was sensing that he might cause himself some harm with what was going on in his life. And it had me nervous, had me worried. So I reached out to him a few times, talked to a couple other chiefs that I could have confidence in that was on our board. And I was just concerned. And it really got me thinking about, man, these chiefs are under a ton of pressure. And that sounds self-serving for me to say that. I hope it isn't, because I am a chief. But I think people need to be rooted in their faith, be rooted in their purpose, be rooted in their family, because if you're going to take on that role as a police chief or an executive in a law enforcement agency, the pressure is going to come on hard, and you're going to need something to lean on, and you're going to have to stand with that fake Superman suit on. But behind the scenes, it's a lot of, and it's not just chronic stress, or I'm sorry, it's not acute stress, it's chronic stress, right? It just keeps building and it building, and so I think that's something. The next step, the next wave in police officer wellness is for our executives. I think we've got a pretty good thing going right now with folks like yourself and the chiefs of police associations and all that for our officers.
Thank you. I really
Mhm.
appreciate you sharing. And one of the things that you said earlier that I'll just kind of circle back to is, you saying in the beginning, when you implemented this as a mandate within your organization, you said, hey, I'm a part of this organization. And so I'm also going to be participating in these
Mhm.
things. And so for you to have the ability to be vulnerable and to say like, hey, like I'm a human too. Yes, I'm the leader of this organization. Yes, I, have the chief title, but I also have stress. I also have things that I need to talk about. I think that the more conversations that we can have with executives who are willing to admit that, like, hey, it is lonely at the top and there are a lot of pressures, and it is really hard to dedicate your entire life to something and not truly maybe know the impact that you're having, and to just see, negativity within social media posts and all these things are really hard. And for you to say that, and then to say, hey, I recognize that other people feel this way too. I can't be the only one, on this island alone, that there are a lot of other executives out there that feel the same. And how can we create a system that supports every single person within the organization and that also includes you as, an executive or chief of the organization? I appreciate that. And I think that it is something that's forgotten about, and I say it all the time. I think that you guys are really good at taking care of everybody else, but then sometimes, and I do the same, sometimes like we neglect ourselves, and you have to realize that in order to be an effective leader, you also have to be able to take care of yourself too.
Right.
You can't let that glass overflow. There was something that I heard, and I think this relates, and I hopefully, you can stay on track with me, but someone said that grief or sadness is a byproduct of love. And I was thinking of this in the context of purpose, while you're talking. And if you have a deep purpose and mission and you love what you do, and you got into the career because you have that deep rooted, drive to help people, and you love what you do, you love the mission, then grief and sadness and hardship, those things are going to be a byproduct of what you do, and it's the same thing with our personal lives, like in relationships, if you love your partner, there's also going to be hard times. There's going to be sad things. There's going to be grief, and it's this idea of how do we continue to train ourselves so that we can see the bigger picture, so that we can have gratitude for the things that we have, so that we can connect to our why and our purpose, and understanding that the hard stuff is a byproduct of it, but the mission
Mhm.
and the pursuit of what we're doing and the greater purpose is worthwhile. And I think sometimes we get lost in the hard stuff, that we can't see the bigger purpose, or we can't see the mission, or we can't see that all of this is a byproduct of the good things in our lives, and how can we continue to focus and train ourselves to see the good stuff, even in the midst of all the hard things.
Yeah, that's hard to do because we kind of are as human beings. I think uh, a people who wants to make a name for ourselves, right? We
Mm.
start young. I have goals. I'm going to become X, Y, Z, whatever that might be. When you're really young and you're just running hard through life and you're bypassing so many important things that you just don't know it till you get older. Then you reflect and you realize that. Then we try to pass that on to the young folks behind us, but they're just like us when we were running hard at that, right?
Yeah.
And so getting somebody to recognize the important things in life and to hold on to them and grasp them as things that are more important than the things you're chasing. That's theological as much as it's just philosophical suggestions, right? It's something you love for your neighbor. That's what you're expressing, right? Having love for your neighbor, and that's why I think this job in law enforcement is such a privilege. So when officers are like, the job is hard, I work hard, I don't have any time. Are you really stressed? That's what I usually ask. Are you really stressed because of events you've had dealt with? Because I really have a plan for that for you. If you're stressed because of major acute situations you've been involved in, that we can take care of. But if you're stressed because you really can't focus on purpose and you're just sort of angry at about everything, um, there's something else you need to shift. You need to find out what your purpose is. And really, in law enforcement, if you don't recognize that your purpose is the people, who can show greater love than law enforcement? You
Mm.
can put yourself in a position, and hopefully you don't die from it. But if you do die from it, it's greater love has no man to lay his life down for his brother. That's what we that's who we are. It's an opportunity. It's not a burden. I keep saying that it's not a burden. We have a saying here where we say, this may sound crazy, but when we say this, policing is not about the police. Never has been, should never be. It's about the people that we protect and we serve.
Mm.
And when we get so focused on ourselves, we start to lose sight that there's a lot of stressors out there for other people too. And I know a lot of my officers. I was in the military for 6 years, overseas twice, as you mentioned earlier. And I know individual people who've had some major, major tragedy in their life. But I've also think about the people that we serve and protect. And I think that there's rarely a time, even in this conversation, the time you and I have been talking right now, there is some young girl somewhere being human trafficked, and she's being forced to take drugs and all this stuff. And I won't go into details of it, but it's a world I worked in the past for a while. And I can tell you that somewhere there's some young girl whose tragedy, whose stressors, whose PTSD is so far beyond what we can even conceive in a 30-year career. And you have a chance to go help her. Nobody else can do it like you can do it. And that's what I generally tell my officers. That should lift you up. Every single moment you find someone who's been victimized, and then you find the person who victimized them and you put them in the justice system, that's a win.
Yeah.
Every single time you prevent something from happening, even taking a drunk driver off the road, you've saved someone's life, most likely, and a family, right? Every one of those are wins. So as I said, the one who was, it's been a while back, but he was really struggling. A lot of it was his own problems. The number, as you probably know, the number one things that get cops in trouble was alcohol and sex, right? Those are the two things that cause them to lose their families, and they're usually outlets from something else. So I tell them, so listen, you know what the number one cure for PTSD is? It's or depression. The number one cure. I've never met anybody that can do this and still have depression. Stop thinking about yourself. Find someone in your neighborhood whose grass you can cut for them, that you can do something for someone else
Mm.
and not ask for anything in return. And when you see, a lady in her 80s and you mowed her grass and cleaned it all up for her, and you wanted nothing from her just to see her happy face, you know how impossible that is to be stressed out at the end of that. So that's what you need to do. Love your neighbor. I think that's what you were saying. That's what it sounded like anyway.
Yeah. And I think that, one thing I want to point out that I've heard throughout this whole conversation, and I don't know if you recognize that you do this, but um, perspective is everything. And we all have the ability to choose how we look at things in our lives. And you can choose to look at things with gratitude. You can choose to look at the positive or the reverse, right? And everything I heard from you is you waking up every day choosing to have gratitude, choosing to find your purpose, choosing to recognize that what you do is powerful and worthwhile. And it's hard. It's mental training. It takes practice. Some people are innately that way. I think you meet some
Mm-hmm.
people that are just forever optimists. They wake up and, a cloudy day, it's sunny to them, and I would say most people are not that way. We have to train ourselves, and it's the little things that compound over time, right? It's are we waking up in the morning with a smile on our face saying, I get to do this today? Or are we
Mm-hmm.
waking up scoffing and saying, I have to do this today? Both are a choice. And we have to, realize the power that we have in our own lives to choose the perspective and how we choose to show up and how we choose to lead and the conversations we have with other people, the conversations we have with ourselves. And so that was one thing I just wanted to throw out there. I recognized throughout the entire conversation. And it's a reminder to anyone that we all have the choice. We really do, and it's not easy all the time. And, of course, like there are going to be hard days and, maybe you're not perfect and, some days are going to be harder than others, but I catch myself sometimes, I have to have that self-assessment and accountability in myself. Am I waking up saying I have to do this, or am I waking up saying I get to do this?
Right.
And
Yeah.
my hope is that we can all train ourselves every day to wake up and realize that I I dreamt of this. I worked really hard. And everyone who's listening to this, we all worked so hard to be in the positions that we're in now. You dreamt, I'm sure, of being a chief at some point. Maybe you didn't like enter into it being like
Sure.
chief or nothing, but at some point you're like, wow, like I want that, right? You applied for it, you went through the whole process of, being considered to be a chief. And so I think we all have to have a little bit of recognition that like we wanted this. We
Mhm.
asked for this in one way or another. And our younger selves would be super proud of us, to be in these positions now. And so I appreciate you showing up with that perspective and having these conversations where we can all ask ourselves, are we doing that on a day to day? Are we recognizing the privilege that we have to show up and to do the work that we do?
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, for that.
My
Sure.
final question, and I knew this, I knew walking into this that we were going to run out of time because
I
I
apologize.
just knew, no, I just knew it was going to be a great
Mhm.
conversation. So I appreciate you coming on, and
Mhm.
you've already given so many words of wisdom and, advice, but I have to ask the final question. It is for the younger generation.
Mhm.
What words of wisdom would you share with them that maybe you wish you would have known or that have helped you along the way?
Well, since we talk chiefs and them, I'll act like it's a new officer and a new executive at the same time, but
Okay.
because I think the message is the same, and that is just remembering that this job is not your identity. The sooner you can realize this is not your identity, it doesn't define who you are. Certain things that you don't get in life in that job won't be so crushing. You should have a goal when you start this career to retire loving it more than you did when you're trying to get into the academy. That is a hard one to do, but you should do it. If you find yourself at the end of your career being a little bit upset, or even in the middle of your career being upset with, I just don't like to go to work, or I'm counting the days to retirement, you've lost perspective, as you were just mentioned. You've lost your purpose. Sit back and reevaluate. The little things that tend to make us upset in our careers, I promise you 10 years from now, we're not going to care about. But people are so stressed they don't sleep over them. So if a perfectly successful career to me is for an officer, please don't get too much caught up in the locker room talk and the locker room attorneys who sort of tell you all the things that your grievances are. Focus on the job. Go out every single day seeking to make a difference in someone else's life. There's going to be days you're going to have hard times to do that because of the various things that happen, both at home and here, that weigh on you. But even on the stressful times, you're in a perfect position where you can go out and shut that off and do something for someone else, right? Even if you stop and change someone's tire, you don't know how much that actually affects somebody just to see a police officer change their tire from. A lot of our officers think that's beneath them. I'll just call a record. To me, no, do that. Change their tire. That says a lot about how much you care and respect them. And that should be your career goal. Love it, communicate. Don't make it turn it into something that it's not, and don't think so much about your reputation, because everybody's going to have various opinions of your reputation. I would say focus on what your character is, and you know that inside. Your closest people know it. Find purpose, cling to your faith in your family, and when this is done, you're going to have a journey that most people never got the opportunity to have, and you should leave not wanting to leave.
Mm, love it. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on here and talking about leadership and wellness. So thank you very much.
No, Paige, and I forgot to say this, but I will say it here. Thank you for what you do. I was looking at a lot of your videos and stuff, and I didn't know anything about you till you reached out to me. Then I started watching some of the videos and your interactions. I didn't think I had much to add because you had such great guests on there. You have had a lot of tremendous chiefs. I'll continue to listen. I shared it with my officers. So thanks for what you do. I cannot say it enough. I'm confident that you've saved some lives out there.
Thank you. That means
Thank
a
you.
lot. I really appreciate it.
Mhm.